has like over 180.
Good afternoon. This is the Business, Arts, Workforce, and Aviation Services Committee. And I'm Wayne Newsom, the Councilman for District 10, as the chairman of the committee. And we'll go in first and let my colleague introduce herself. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Stacy Gilmore, District 11, the front door to Denver.
Jonathan Griffin, Legislative Analyst.
Right. Well, we have one program of presentation today, and it's one of our favorite departments, Excise and License here. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ashley and have everybody be introduced, and we'll go ahead.
Great. I'm Ashley Kilroy. I'm the Executive Director of Excise and Licenses today, and we're here to give you sort of an update of everything we've been doing, sort of a general business update, but also then sort of narrow in on liquor common consumption. And I'll let the rest of the team introduce themselves.
Molly Duplashane, Deputy Director of Excise and Licenses.
I'm Erica Rogers. I'm a policy analyst with Excise and Licenses.
I'm Reggie Newbine. I'm with the Denver City Attorney's Office.
Great. And with that, if you guys are ready, we'll get started. And Erica's going to do the presentation, and then we can all jump in and answer questions.
Let's welcome Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as Ashley mentioned, we have just a couple of general business licensing updates first. We came and gave an update like this back in October. At that time, we were talking about security guards because that was our big policy project. We like to keep you in the loop on the things that we're doing. Sometimes we forget that other people do not eat, breathe, and sleep licensing like we do. So you're probably wondering what we're up to over there. So we'll start with our operations update. Then we'll go to the liquor common consumption update, and then we can go to questions. So for our liquor EXL operations update, Ashley always likes to say it's a three-legged stool. So we have a licensing piece, we have an inspections piece, and then we have a hearings piece. So these are three good indicators of what's going on in the department, and you can kind of see all the different kinds of activities that we're doing. So as far as licensing goes, we've seen a steady increase. I believe the number is about 10% year-over-year increase on the number of licenses we issue. You can see just in the past 5 years, we've seen a significant increase in the number of licenses being issued in the city. Lots of people want to come and do business. They want to make Denver their home. So in 2018, we issued a total number of 9,372 licenses in the city of Denver. A breakdown of how we're getting applications for those licensing. Our operations team has been working very, very hard to look at efficiencies and how we can help get the most bang for our buck as far as our resources go in the department. And one area they've identified is putting licenses online. So as you can see, just last year we saw a significant increase in the number of online applications we're receiving, which means that our staff members have more time to do detailed investigations, quality control, more qualitative inspections, and things like that. So just from March of last year, when we were seeing 82% of our license applications in person in our lobby, a year later, in February 2019, that number was down to 49%. So less than half, just under half of our applicants are coming in person to our office, which means we're making things more efficient for our customers. We're making things easier for them to do online. We've got up to 44% of our applications are coming in online now.
Okay. Eric, we got Councilwoman Ortega has a question.
Sure.
Is that on every license? So when you're having to look at IDs and, just to verify that's the person that's applying for the license and all that kind of stuff, that are there certain things that are done in person that cannot be done online, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, that's a good question. So just to be clear, these numbers are, total number of all of the different applications for all of the different licenses we issue. Okay. But the reason we still have 49% coming in person is because only certain types of licenses are online.
Okay.
For example, short-term rental licensing is pretty much exclusively online. And when we were figuring out which licenses to put online first, because it requires an initial lift, some technology services, time from our team to put things online, we decided to look at, this is a great segue to the next slide, what are the types of licenses that we issue most? So as you can see from this, our number one license in the city and county of Denver, our most commonly issued license is that security guard. That's the orange block. And since 2015, it has remained our largest license type. This used to be called merchant guards, and it changed last year to security guards. But our team decided that putting that online would be a huge value add because it was our largest volume license. And so if we put that one license, or two licenses for the individual and the company, but if we put that program online and allowed people to submit online, we would see a significant decrease in the wait times in our lobby and the amount of time people had to come down to the city office. So security guards are our largest individual category of licenses. The second largest single category is food. So hotels, restaurants, anywhere that serves food, pop-ups, food trucks, that's all captured in that blue category. The third largest category is for liquor. That's the red category. You can see that has been about 12 to 15% of our volume of our total licenses over the past 5 years. A steady dark horse coming through since 2017 is the short-term rental license. That's that light green at the top. We started licensing these in 2017, and we've seen a steady increase in people coming into compliance, getting that license. So they are now our fourth largest category of licensing that we see in the city.
Erica, which one of those have to come in person?
The short-term rental is online, security guard is online, food is still in person, and liquor is still in person. Yeah.
I was thinking short-term rental is a higher percentage. Am I thinking about something differently? I was thinking you had they were on Airbnb were like 50%.
Oh, you might be thinking of our compliance rate.
Right.
So this is the amount of total licenses in our city. In 2019, 16% of the total licenses
16 of the total is
were
not-
short-term rentals.
Okay.
But of those short-term rental licenses, we have Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, but almost an 80% compliance rate? 72%.
That's great. That's great improvement with last time.
Yes.
Good.
So Denver's been recognized as one of the cities with the highest compliance rate in that area. So after that, we have marijuana with, a single-digit percentage, and then that yellow category is other. So those are all of the other over 180 different business licenses we issue make up a small percentage. So when we looked at what to go online first, we wanted to, like I said, go for the value add, go for the biggest categories first, and then that way we're getting more and more people able to do this from home instead of in our office.
And our long-term plan is to continue this. And Molly's looking at which ones are the next ones that are best for going online, which ones should probably be tweaked before we get it online. And not only reducing wait times, but just getting people out of their cars, having people at home, not coming downtown and parking, saving them time, and us time.
Is our process time the same?
No, it's much more reduced. A security guard license, when they used to come at the counter, they pull a ticket, they'd have to wait for a period of time. Our wait times now are really low. But security guards would have to come, pull a ticket, wait for a period of time, and then sit at the counter, and that processing transaction time took about 20 minutes. Now we can move those front of the house licensing techs to the back of the house, and they can process about 4 to 5 security guard licenses in that 20-minute time. So the processing times increased, and we've had hiccups as we went through to make sure we got everybody trained and they understand it. The team's gone out to some of the big security guard companies to teach them how to do that, but we're now into our second year, and the quality of the online applications is great, and we're really starting to realize those efficiencies. So.
Seems like there'd be more time for a new license versus a renewal, or is that a difference? Is there a difference there?
I think there is some. I don't have specific details on that, but I know that the new applications require more documentation typically.
Okay.
So another area that we can see these efficiencies in, and we updated this chart to show kind of more details about our inspections. So this is another, getting people licensed is great, getting them into the regulatory system is good. That's the first piece. The second piece is inspections. So making sure they're in compliance, making sure that they're following the rules, making sure that they are doing what they say they're going to do before we do issue that license. This chart shows there's 4 categories of inspections. There's more, but these are the main ones that we do. Checking out whether someone has posted their notice, and then whether they're complying with licensing before they get that license, and then the compliance afterwards. So what you can see here, this is a year-to-date snapshot of where we were at this time. The blue is 2017, the gray is 2018, and the pink is this year. As you can see, the number of notice and posting inspections are way down. But our licensing and compliance inspections are up. And this is something that we changed under Ashley's direction because the inspectors would be spending a lot of time getting in their car, driving out to make sure, to do inspections that weren't giving a lot of value add. So in telling people that their license was expired and you need to come down to the department, or checking to see if the notice and posting was up every single day. And we thought that a better use of the time would be if those inspectors would do licensing and compliance inspections where they would write reports that might get sent to our city attorney's office, for example. And if somebody was out of compliance, then we could take enforcement action. So a shift in the type of inspections that we're doing in order to increase the efficiency of our inspection program.
What's posting and notice there? I mean, you're
So for example, if a liquor licensee applies for a liquor license, they have to post notice, a sign usually at their location indicating when their hearing will be, so that for a certain number of days in a place that's visible and conspicuous to the public.
and posting is different than notice.
Well, the posting provides notice.
It's the same thing.
There's also notice that has been posted in publications, so that as well.
What are they can just send a picture of it electronically to you now?
There's different ways that they can do that. I mean, when we really look at what we care about public health, safety, and welfare. That's our mission. So we get that at these more sort of value-add inspections, whether it's going into marijuana businesses and making sure their plants are properly tagged or the doors are secured, or doing undercover underage alcohol sales was a better value add than our inspectors riding around to make sure, they were driving out to businesses, giving the notice to say, oh, by the way, your license is about to expire. And now what we did is we just automated that in Acela. They just get an automatic update. So we are doing fewer inspections, but typically longer and more meaningful inspections.
So the final piece of our three-legged stool, then, we've got licensing, we've got inspections, and we also have hearings. So the public hearing for liquor and marijuana, for example, we have needs and desires hearings for the community to weigh in on whether there is a need and a desire for this type of establishment in their neighborhood. In 2017, you can see we had 147 of these liquor hearings and 21 marijuana. Last year, we were about the same, 143 liquor hearings with 16 marijuana. And 2019 year-to-date, we're almost halfway through. We're at 72 liquor hearings and 7 marijuana hearings. So these include needs and desires for liquor, for new applications, modifications, and transfers of location. For marijuana, they include new applications and transfer of location.
Eric, any of them denied?
I'm sorry?
Any of these denied?
Of the total hearings, yes, some have been denied.
This is usually a small percentage.
I would have to run the data. I don't want to speculate, but this is just the total number that we held.
Yes, great, thank you.
And this doesn't include, for example, show cause hearings, so or show cause orders that have been, issued for compliance. Some of those inspections, if they do like an underage compliance check, if they serve to somebody, a cadet who's under the age of 21, we would issue a show cause, so that's not captured in these. The next piece of the presentation, and we thought this was important to share, kind of goes over some potential new licensing options. So in addition to our everyday application processing, licensing, inspections, hearings. We also have, Molly and I on our team, our policy team, things that we're looking at constantly and that we're researching and doing outreach about, that maybe you don't hear about or read about, but that we are working very hard on. So we wanted to give you kind of an overview of some of these projects, that, many topics that come to you have a licensing component or issue. So here's some of the things that are in the news that deal with licensing. The first one that's probably going to be on your radar is tobacco. This is an issue that DDPHE is leading the charge on. I know that you've probably heard about the increase of the age to 21, and they're also going to do some outreach to look at whether there needs to be a licensing component for tobacco retailers. So that's something that they've looped us in on to help them as they do that outreach, so that they can think about all the different questions that need to be asked if they wanted to develop a license. In the realm of liquor, we've got liquor common consumption that we've been working on. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Also this year, you'll probably hear some sort of ordinance request for licensing rules at the National Western Center. The legislature passed a bill this year that specified that the National Western Center would follow the rules similar to the state fair. So looking at what that means and what that's going to look like, so that's probably going to be an issue that you'll see this year. Marijuana, the legislature was very busy this year passing a lot of bills that create options for localities to opt into. These would all be new business models that are kind of different from what we've seen with our regulated marijuana business industry here in Denver. Some of these examples of things that localities could have the ability to opt into if the governor signs them are hospitality and sales establishment license. This is similar to our designated consumption area licenses. However, it would add a component where people could make limited sales. There's also the delivery license. The state has looked at allowing delivery from licensed marijuana facilities or by transporters to patients or customers in a phased-in program starting with medical marijuana. The state has also adopted what's called an accelerator license, and this is an interesting new type of license that wouldn't go into effect until after next legislative session, but it looks to be geared toward creating equity in the marijuana industry and allowing operators some opportunities to operate without requiring a lot of the startup costs, but still having that protection of a license. The other final license that is in the marijuana category is research and development. This was adopted a few years ago, but the state had made some updates, and that's one that we're looking at in Denver as well. Updates and other types of miscellaneous licenses that aren't in those big three kind of vice categories are body artists who have to get a license. Molly has been working very hard on that. Then there's hemp, which the legislature also considered this year. They adopted the ability for localities to license kind of the storage and production of hemp products. I think with the passage of the Farm Bill, this is a topic that many are interested in and curious to know what kinds of regulations exist. So this is something we've been researching and working on to try to protect health, safety, and welfare concerns while allowing innovation in the city. Short-term rentals always are a fun topic. Earlier this year, we met with our short-term rental advisory committee, and they indicated that a big priority for them was to be looking at the definition of primary residence and kind of looking at the ever-evolving landscape that other cities have, options other cities have pursued, results of litigation in other places, partnerships with Airbnb and how those are working or not working. And so that was something that they are probably looking to work on this year. And finally, our food, especially in the mobile realm of our food licenses, we've got a couple task forces looking now at mobile markets for bringing produce, healthy food and produce to food deserts in Denver. We've got a group working on food trucks and making sure that the regulations are streamlined and make sense, and then folding those into our existing food regulations, just making sure that we are as efficient as possible and making sure that we're capturing all the different kinds of models. As I mentioned earlier, food is one of our larger categories of licenses. It's one of the largest single categories. So before we move that online, we wanted to look at all the different ways that, as we mentioned, maybe tweaking it to bring it up to date from the last time it was updated, which some of these ordinances haven't been updated since the 1950s. So we want to make sure they work for Denver today.
Eric, any idea of how many food establishments there are that y'all inspect? I mean, thousands.
A
I'm sure.
lot.
Thousands, huh?
If you're curious, I can definitely have our data team pull that.
It'd be interesting to know, but.
Sure.
Let me ask one other question about the National Western Center. Equating it to the State Fair, is that what they desire to, is that a big deal, or? what-
I mean, I can't speak for the bill drafters, and I know there's a whole team of, definitely in our city attorney's office, and I think in the mayor's office as well, working on that issue. So it's not something I want to speculate on too much. I just know that it is a topic that will have to be addressed, probably in an ordinance, because it's changed the structure.
We'll see some of that when they bring their rezoning application to us on part of that campus.
Yeah, they have a great presentation with detailed plans and phases, and I got to listen to it when they presented at the INC Zoning and Planning Committee meeting a few weeks ago. So if you're interested, definitely invite them. They have a ton of information.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So now we'll move into a brief update on the liquor common consumption that we've been working on. So we'll kind of talk about three things here and field some questions, but we'll first start with the outreach that we've done, so you know what the work we've been doing, and then we'll briefly present the concept itself, and then we can kind of talk about our ideas for next steps and if you have any questions. I brought with me a detailed outreach report, so if any of you would like this, we have a copy. But to summarize it here, we kind of did outreach with 4 different groups, right? We started internally at the beginning of last year, talking to our internal partners, because this was something that we were hearing people wanted to do, people were trying to do creatively. It was something that people wanted, and so our directive was to, see how this could look in Denver, talk to the people who are interested, and come up with a model. So we started doing that by talking to the city agency directors of a bunch of different agencies who would be interested. Our department, Excise and License, the city attorney's office, Public Works, CPD, DDPHE, fire, police, Office of Special Events, the mayor's office. So we kind of talked to everybody about what is your capacity? Do you like this idea? We talked about high-level policy options, right? To see if this was something that our partners internally in the city would have the capacity to do, and if so, what that capacity was. Once we had some of those high-level policy discussions, that group said, yeah, we think this is good to pursue, go forth and do some external outreach. So we planned at the beginning of last summer, we set some meetings with cluster groups, and these are a great way that Ashley has come up with to get feedback from different groups where they don't feel overpowered by other groups. So we didn't want the RNOs to feel overpowered by tourism or the bids to feel overpowered by liquor licensing attorneys. So we met with each of these groups individually in clusters, and we invited groups of about 15 to 20, I believe, where people could come, give us their feedback. We would tell them a little bit about the program, and they would tell us, oh, I like this feature, or I don't like this, or how would you deal with XYZ? Have you thought about ABC? And we took all of that feedback and really listened to what people were saying at those meetings. After those meetings, we noticed that one group that we didn't hear as much from as we thought we would is the RNOs in the neighborhood. So we decided to do additional outreach there because these are the groups that I think had the most nitty-gritty questions about some of our policies and procedures and how they would be tied into the fold. So in the fall, we held 2 community meetings to get more feedback. Excuse me. And we invited every RNO registered with the city. We invited INC, It was publicized on their website. We reached out to council and invited all council members. And this was a way that we thought, we'll hold them in the community in the evenings. Anyone can come and they can give us their feedback. They can hear a little bit about how how the state statute works, and then give us their feedback on whether they want this in Denver, if so, what they would want it to look like, et cetera, et cetera. We've also met with a few individual RNOs, either by presenting at their board or speaking with their representatives over the phone or email. I attended the INC Zoning and Planning Committee meeting earlier this spring, as well as their delegate meeting. And finally, we had what we called a community update meeting a few weeks ago, May 2nd. And that was kind of to touch base with the community and say, okay, we heard all of your feedback last summer, last fall. We've been talking to you individually and interacting with you, thinking about the good questions you've posed, the issues you've brought up. We've discussed them with our team of wonderful city attorneys. And so the update was really a means to give the community, come back and say, hey, here's what we've been working on. Here are some of the features that you requested or that we came up with in response to the questions you had or the issues you raised or the different configurations you came up with. We got lots and lots of questions. So this was our way to come back to the community and say, here's where we are and here's what we're thinking of doing next. We let them know we would be here today if they wanted to come. So that brings us to council. As you all know, we did some council briefings in the fall just to let you know that we were working on this and how the concept works. We did submit an ordinance request to officially start the process. We have today's update to bring you guys up to speed on the work we've been doing just as we updated the community. And then we're happy to return with a detailed presentation when you're ready to hear just how the nitty-gritty details that we did provide to the community. So the overall concept is we reduced it to one slide to kind of make it as simple as possible. It's not a simple concept. I will be forthcoming about that. The state statute is a bit hard to understand. It's a bit hard to figure out the process, and it leaves some gaps that a locality would have to fill in. So the basics of this concept are that it would be an amenity that we see as a tool for communities to use for placemaking and community building. We have gotten requests for this from the community, from groups that want to do it, from groups that are, like I said, doing this creatively or trying to get the feel of one of these licenses creatively. And we wanted to debunk a few myths because we know that the terms and the concept can be scary and raise a lot of anxieties in people, so we wanted to address those right out in front. So the big question we get is, and the big concern is this going to look like Bourbon Street? Are we bringing Bourbon Street to Denver? And the answer is no. Bourbon Street, you can walk around freely with a drink. Many people like to go visit there, but we're not looking to bring it here. One big feature of these licenses is they would not be open to motor traffic. Just like our regular liquor licenses, they would have to be either indoors or in a place that has been closed down to any motor vehicle traffic. And to do that, you have to go through a lot of steps with Public Works and other city agencies, filling out applications and getting approvals to do that. So it would not be a Bourbon Street model. Another question we get is, isn't this going to lead to drinking in the streets at all hours? And the answer is no. One thing that we did as part of our outreach and research was looking at other jurisdictions that have done this. So in your packet there, you'll see there's a handful of communities in Colorado that have adopted this. So Greeley, Glendale, Salida, Central City, Carbondale, Fort Collins just adopted it. And most of these places, due to some of the requirements in the statute, just don't have the density to do more than one. Aurora has 2. And we might see some other bigger cities do more than one, but there is one of the cities, Glendale, that allows drinking past 2 a.m. Using this model, and the state has said that's okay. But one thing that we've been very adamant about from the beginning of this process is that that is not something we're looking to do in Denver. That's not something that's true to Denver values. It's not what the residents of Denver want, and so that's not something that we would be pursuing. Another question that we get, people, the terminology is a bit confusing, but they worry, are patrons going to be allowed to take alcohol anywhere they want, from one building to another, across the town? Is this just going to totally eliminate any concept we have of that controlled premise idea? And that answer is also no. We've still got the concept that you have to be liquor license premise, you have to have control of that premise, and you can't take that alcohol outside of that premise. Now, these types of establishments would allow patrons to consume alcohol that they've gotten maybe from 2 to 3 or 4, what have you, different liquor licensed establishments. But a big requirement is that there would need to be a security plan. And this is something Councilman New, I know, is very interested in. That security plan would have requirements for, how are you going to staff this? How are you going to enclose it? Are you going to have security guards at entrances, signage? How are you going to control for the ingress and egress of patrons? All things like that we kind of currently consider for our normal liquor licenses. Maybe if they have a patio, it would be a little bit beefed up because these are a new type of license. Finally, the big question that neighborhoods have is, is this going to be forced upon my neighborhood? Are we going to be forced to deal with the negative consequences that we foresee from allowing this in our neighborhood? And that answer is no. We did hear a lot of concern over noise and trash and nuisance concerns that are associated with any kind of event or license type. But because these would be potentially permanent fixtures in the community, we wanted to ensure that there was some additional protection for community groups and that the process for them was a little bit more inclusive than some of the other licenses that we even have. So some examples that we've looked at including are a requirement for evidence of community support. This is an idea that we borrowed from the designated consumption area marijuana license. So before an applicant could even apply, they would have to go out into their community, talk to people, and get the support of at least one RNO or BID or community group to show that that's something that isn't totally opposed in that community. In addition, the common consumption areas could be either permanent or on an event basis. And currently for liquor license special events, a hearing isn't required. It can be requested if a community group requests it, but most special events go on without any hearing being requested. So one thing that we wanted to build in as an additional protection was a required hearing for any type of license, whether it be a permanent establishment or an event type. So that would give the community much more say over some of these special events that seem to be the cause of a lot of anxieties in the community members we talk to. That's where they really have the concerns about the trash, the noise, the nuisance, things like that. So no neighborhood will be forced to do it. They will have to go to a hearing. And we've got some other features as well that we'll dive into at a future time. So the one thing we wanted to end with on the concept is that we are absolutely committed to working together with our community members, with the industry people who are going to be bringing these to fruition, to craft a model that is true to Denver values and listens to the concerns of our citizens. So our path forward, what we're thinking next is we are going to continue to do outreach as we have been doing throughout the whole process since I think December of 2017. I'm actually scheduled to go visit a couple more individual RNOs. Mr. New has been so kind to set up some time in his community, so we're happy to continue doing that with anyone who wants answers to questions, because there are lots of questions. And then we would bring forth an ordinance for consideration to this committee. If an ordinance were to pass, then we have an idea that the ordinance, just like our security guard ordinance, would not go into effect until we could form a rulemaking advisory group that could adopt rules and advise us on some of those really important details that the community does care a lot about. We wanted to give them a chance to continue participating even after a framework was identified so that they could really advise us on those things that are the most important to them. And only then would a pilot program begin. I believe the draft ordinance says 90 days after any rules are adopted. So we would want the whole package to be available for applicants and neighborhoods and residents to know before anything would go into effect. So with all of that, I know that's a lot of information, so does anyone have any questions?
Yes, we'll take.
I have a couple. So first, on the alcohol, is there an anticipated sort of time frame in which you're hoping to have that community engagement process done to garner that broad input and then have something ready to bring to council?
So we think we've got a pretty good model. We feel like it is pretty comprehensive, and we've tried to look at every question we've gotten from community members. What we're seeing is a lot of the same questions asked by several people. And so we think we've addressed a lot of those questions and concerns in the model that we have. We've done a ton of outreach, and like I said, we're happy to continue doing it. I think a lot of it is going to be education too, because the concept is pretty complex. So if you want to take a look at the outreach plan, you can see that we've done a ton of work over the past year, and we think that we're ready, and so we are happy to bring that model that we think is ready, and happy to do the education and outreach necessary to.
So you don't have a targeted time frame just yet to bring it to
I
council?
think we'd like to come next month, and we can come by, next month, if that's okay. We can come by and do more council briefings. We've really put a lot of time and effort into this, but we're happy to keep talking to more people as you guys provide additional people you'd like us to reach out to.
Okay, great. So on the short-term rental, have we seen the number of short-term rentals grow in our city?
That's probably more for Molly, yes.
Yes, we have. So we're kind of holding, we saw an increase maybe towards the end of last year with the number of short-term rentals that were advertising a listing. And then throughout last year, we also ramped up our enforcement of that. And so we did see licenses start to increase. And then as a result of that, we saw postings decrease. So, which is what helped us get to an increased licensing compliance rate.
So can you give a ballpark of how many we have in our city
Sure,
right now?
it's about 2,600 to 2,700 licensed.
Okay. All right, and then on the marijuana accelerator license, is that just for sales? And if so, do we see that we expect to see more licenses applied for in the city? And how does that then bump up against our cap?
Those are
Well,
excellent
yeah.
questions. So the accelerators would be a state license. We are kind of hanging tight right now to see what the rulemaking committees this summer provide as far as additional information about that and the other license types that the state will likely adopt. The accelerator is for individuals. It's an individual license that would allow them to work in already licensed grows or MIPS. Manufacturing facilities, and it would be akin to a commissary kitchen type of setup where.
So people who are growing at home could potentially try to sell their stuff out of an existing facility? Is that an example? I'm trying to understand what an
Yeah.
individual
I
would
guess,
be.
so I think
different.
like the best way to think about it, I think it was an attempt by some really thoughtful people who we've been talking to figure out how to make the industry more diverse and inclusive. And this is a way to allow people to basically grow sort of an Airbnb model using an already existing licensee's grow, and then grow their own marijuana in a portion of it where they don't have
A
to have
shared
all
garden.
Right. And same thing, like maybe if somebody has a big MIP, a marijuana-infused product, that person could host or incubate the accelerator, and they could have a certain area of that property to make their own tonics and tinctures. So one of the things we've been looking at now for over a year is the industry itself and, the issue that we're seeing across the country are challenges with diversity and inclusivity in the marijuana industry because of a number of things, but particularly including barriers to entrance. So we've got, all those marijuana licenses, plus, as you saw on under other, we have hemp licenses. So we've been working on this. We've been meeting with communities. We have an RFP that's gone out right now to get an idea of what are the numbers of race and ethnicity numbers in the industry to begin with. Where do we think the industry is going long term? And looking at all that, we think this is an opportunity to figure out where we can come up with some type of equity programs. Other cities have done some, and they're, still getting off the ground, but we've been talking to other communities and doing a lot of work around this.
So the state law then would allow them to be in existing establishments as long as those existing establishments are willing to make their space available,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about new locations, so we're not going to bump into the cap issue with locations.
Correct. Those would not be new
They
locations.
can't sell from their home either, right?
Correct.
No.
They cannot.
Okay. And then one last question, if I may, Mr. Chair. Just jumping back to the short-term rentals, have we thought about doing a cap on how many short-term rentals we want to allow in our city? I mean, we've done that with marijuana. I mean, when we talk about 2,700 short-term establishments in our city, residences, that means that's 2,700 units that aren't available to people struggling to afford to live in this city. And, I know it's a business model, it's something that came before city council, but we're having a whole different conversation right now around changes to our group
Absolutely,
living ordinance and what that might do to free up some opportunities. And before too long, those recommendations from the group living committee will come before city council to share what those various ideas are for the different categories that fall under the group living ordinance. But we're struggling in this city to try to figure out, how do we be a city that can afford the opportunity for everybody who wants to live here, and not just people who have the financial means to do that. And so I guess I'm just curious whether that's a conversation you all have had.
That is a huge conversation we've been having, and something that is absolutely on our radar. And we've been researching other jurisdictions. We've been looking at some business models. I think that what most of the research shows, that yes, if you've got cities that allow people to have more than one short-term rental, if you can buy,
Yeah.
one or two or one or
Right.
three or whatever, you can see a negative impact on affordability in those communities. But if you have a model like we have, where it's your primary residence, they're not seeing, so far, the preliminary data we're seeing, if it's a primary residence, you're not seeing that negative impact on affordability. And in fact, you're probably helping some people stay in their home by being able to rent a room. The struggle we have, right, is whether or not this is truly somebody's primary residence.
Right.
And so that enforcement piece, so there's ideas about beefing up that primary residence. Other cities have also done models that, well, yes, you can rent your primary residence and make some money off of it, but we're going to say you can only do it 60 days out of the year or something like that. The balance is letting people stay in their home and make some money off of it, maintaining affordability, and also to ensure that we don't have commercial encroachment into our neighborhoods and change our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
At the same time, about as fast as we're moving, new models are popping up. So
Yeah.
we did meet with Jill Jennings the other day on some of these new models, and this is something we really want to bring back to you guys pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But we'll be getting it to you. That's why it's on that agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Thank you,
Councilman
Mr.
Gilmore?
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Common Consumption Areas Program, is there an FAQ that you could send over to the council offices so that we can at least share out to RNOs and neighbor? I know I'm remembering the earlier presentation, and it was a little bit
Yep.
complicated, how it could work, but if you do have a high-level FAQ, and that if we could also have that translated into Spanish, that would be
And
wonderful.
we would all probably want to get a copy of that
Yes.
to share with people.
Yeah, all of us, yeah.
Yeah. And then, if you wouldn't mind, remind me, what's the length of the license? Is it renewed on an annual basis, or?
Yeah, it would be an annual license like our other licenses. The concept that we're thinking of would be a 5-year pilot program.
Okay. And then what, around, your conversations with RNOs, community groups, and then also INC, I guess what was the general feeling about that community groups could, be the initial point of contact, and I guess folks in a neighborhood feeling comfortable with that it might be a community group that isn't from the neighborhood necessarily? If you could share a little bit about what the conversation was and feedback from folks.
Well, I can just sort of say high level what we heard from sort of BIDs, bids, and community people. They wanted it to meet their values and be an opportunity in their community for that placemaking and community building. We also heard from small businesses as an opportunity to maybe activate an area in their neighborhood where that small business, could, a bar and a restaurant and another bar could do this, but also activate some of the retail businesses around there. Because if they're part of the common consumption area, people can also be shopping. I'll let Erica talk about, did you get those specific questions about who should be doing this?
Are you referencing the evidence of community support
Yes.
at the beginning?
Well, I guess who can put the application in? Because it could be a community group.
I
Correct.
see, right. So the applicant would be a promotional association, and it could be made up of, are you thinking like the members that also belong to a BID?
Yes.
Yes, that's actually an interesting point, and it's one of the things that is on
I
our,
could see some of our farmers markets wanting to maybe go there. You know what I mean?
right. So the state statute does have parameters for who can be, who the applicant is and what kind of requirements they have to meet. For example, the promotional association has to submit annual reports to the local liquor licensing authority. They have to carry liability insurance. They have to have a board of directors. And they have to have at least one director from each of the liquor licensed premises that would be in the common consumption area that they would be overseeing. We might have additional requirements.
So it can't be sort of like a special event where you have a totally outside group come in and do it. You have to have those anchor businesses. You have to have 2 or more anchor businesses on that block in that area that have an area for the common consumption area. And so it really will be that community driven. And then what happens, as opposed to like where a special event might come, and they'll come and they'll shut down the streets, and then they'll bring in the beer truck and the wine truck and block that neighborhood bar out. This would be more neighborhood driven and let those small businesses in your neighborhoods actually make the money on selling the alcohol.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With this issue about the special events and this issue is very important because, we've had problems where outside groups coming in and closing down blocks without, approval of neighborhoods or even the businesses. And I think y'all are going about it the right way. Y'all are actually working with the group within that area, right? Not an outside group.
Yes.
And there has to be some kind of discussion with neighborhoods, you're saying, as well, right?
And we've extended the time. So like if you're going to get a liquor license special event under state law, you have to come to us 30 days ahead of time. That's hardly even enough time they're posted, but neighbors don't know what's going on or get to us in time. We've made this, how long do you need to post?
60 days.
60 days to give some more lead up time so we can get that community feedback.
Well, maybe we can have some more discussion with special events to have a consistency in the models
Yeah.
here because we're still having
Yeah.
problems in
Yeah.
special events. So
So one of the only other things I wanted to add to this conversation is that for some of the special events that are being permitted, the meters are allowed to be bagged days in advance and stay covered days after the event, which is taking away from, parking that the businesses in the area are wanting to have access to for their customers. And the other part of it is they have not been given the opportunity. I mean, I can remember in the past where we would close down 32nd Avenue to do the street fair there. When Santa Fe started, it required signatures from the adjacent property owners, and it had to have a certain percentage. Now, we're just issuing these licenses where the businesses have no idea this event's coming up because there was no notification process at all. And, you know, they can't get into their business, their customers can't get in because the streets are closed off. And then if they have a delivery, you know, their trucks can't park because the bags are metered, so the meters are bagged. So some of those kinds of issues, I think, need to be part of the bigger conversation as we continue to talk about how do we commercialize our streets
Right.
for these events, but at the same time take into consideration the impact to adjacent neighbors, whether they're residents or businesses.
And that was a big topic that we heard a lot of the same questions from many different people on. So one feature that we've added to the state model is a requirement that the applicant submit we're calling it a parking and transportation plan. And then the idea is that in role, we would develop the requirements of what all needs to be included in that.
Notification
So
has
if you
to
are
be part
going
of it.
to bag meters, if you're going to request use of the street, if you're going to disturb the flow of traffic, are you going to provide transportation services either through a taxi cab stop or Lyft and Uber services? We want people to be thinking about all of those things before they submit an application.
And we'll also, when somebody comes and submits the application, we're then going to have a process where we do a full agency review. So it will go to Public Works, and Public Works can say, nope, we can't do it that day because we've got something else going on, or we've got construction. We're going to also send it through Katie Stracina, who could say, no, because the Colfax Marathon's going on that weekend. We're going to run it through all of our agencies so we can get that full eyes on what's going on in the community.
Good.
I mean, what we really hope to see is this more, the indoor models, much easier, right? Or an outdoor model, but it's on private property, like a vacated alley, like some of the bars and restaurants we see. But for these where they would consider closing down the streets, we've said if you're going to do that under this model, we're still going to limit it to 15 days. So it's just the same limit.
Out of the
That
year,
special, yeah.
not consecutively.
Could they be consecutive? Per year. And so that's what special events already is, 15 days a year, but this has a lot more parameters around it, and our own businesses will be able to make the money off of selling the liquor rather than them bringing in an outside vendor.
An additional feature, too, that we wanted to add was typically in a needs and desires hearing, you get a short amount of time. The citizens can, in that designated area, can testify about the need or the desire. With this type of hearing, they would also have all of those plans so the parking and transportation plan they would have at least 60 days to look over that and form an opinion before they have to testify at that hearing, whether they're in support or against. A couple of other things that we would require are that security plan. So site and security, what's your ingress and egress? Are you going to have guards? Are you going to have signage? Are you going to have, what kinds of closure to the outside world, things like that. And then in addition, a health and sanitation plan, because that was another big area of concern. So, how many people are you going to have in that? How are you going to have enough trash or recycling receptacles or restrooms, hand washing sinks, anything like that? So
Then
those
it's
are
all
all.
hauled away.
So thinking about all of those things prior to submitting an application and then giving the community that 60-day period at least to review those and look at them before the hearing.
Great. Thank you.
What this bagging meter issue is a very important issue. We've been having all kind of problems with construction about bagging meters, and it's the same thing. It's like bagging a meter on a Friday when you don't need construction delivery until Monday, and so you got meters bagged all weekend, and retailers can't. And maybe I hope we'll this could sound like a great opportunity to have some discussion with Public Works about, you seem like you should be able to decentralize some of this. To bagging a meter is not exactly rocket science, and I know there's some specific documentation and things that needed to be done, but it seems like we could, with an organized program, especially the way y'all have it and the way it's going to be managed locally within that area, it sound like you would have a great teamwork if you could actually control those meters yourself. So anyway, that's just a thought,
Great point.
something we ought to talk about.
Yeah. Very good.
All right.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
Anything else?
No, thanks for the update.
Thank you for the update. Great
And I also want
discussion.
to really thank Reggie, who really did such a great job on it, as well as Anshul, just our great partners at the City Attorney's Office.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.